Hi everybody, it's Wanda Baader here from Strategize Your Success, and together with my co-host Cynthia Bazin from SmartChic, we are Hot Tips for Biz. Thank you so much for joining us today, and today's special guest expert is Nafissa Shireen, and Nafissa is a profitability and lifestyle expert, and her company is Living Forward Business and Lifestyles Incorporated. Also joining us is Gabrielle Loma, who is a CPA, and Gabrielle's business is GML CPA, and she'll be joining us in on this conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to my co-host to start us off.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining Wanda and I. We are so thrilled for you to be watching live or catching us on the replay. I am so excited to have our guest today, Nafissa Shireen. And you know what, I'm going to pull her up and let her tell you a little bit about herself. So Nafissa, thank you so much for joining Wanda and I today on Hot Tips for Biz.
Thanks for having me, Cynthia.
We are so thrilled. So Nafissa, let's jump right into a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about your business and how you got into business.
How I got into business? Okay, well my background is I actually used to be a former CPA up in Canada, and I've had about 20 years experience in corporate. The first 10 years were working primarily with entrepreneurs, helping them build their businesses, mom and pop shops or creative startups. And then when I finished my education, I was a mature student. I went back to school at 25. I got into the mining industry, and so I've had a lot of experience in building businesses. And the funny thing is that once I got my accounting certification, I never touched a financial statement again. I never did accounting after that.
Wow.
But after a few years in that industry, it was really intense in terms of travel and just the intensity of being at that level. I was a vice president of a copper mining company. I just needed a break. I needed to do something different, and so I started my own business coaching. I originally started it going into wellness coaching, and that did not work out very well because I love fitness for me. It didn't work out very well for my clients. I wasn't that good at it, and I realized, I probably need to actually stick to what I'm good at, and that's business. And so the last 2 years, I really formalized into my coaching and consulting business for small business owners. I actually resigned my CPA because up in Canada there were so many rules that they had that they wouldn't allow me to coach and consult in one business, so I had to make a choice. But the one thing I realized is I can give back the letters, but they cannot take back my experience and knowledge, and so I went forward with that, and now I work with entrepreneurs to help them build their business, help them take their idea and make it profitable. And you guys all know me, and you know me from Facebook. You know how much I love experience and lifestyle and travel, and so I really want to help people create that life that they want for themselves and build the business to support it. So that's basically what I do.
Awesome, Nafissa. You know what I really like about what you say is that you really are walking the talk, and you've had those experiences which you can bring in, into your business life and be able to share them with your clients. So what a perfect topic that we're going to be speaking about today. We're going to be talking about what made you successful in corporate can actually cripple you as an entrepreneur. So you're the perfect person to talk about this. So I'd love to jump right into the first point.
Okay,
We've
sure.
got several points that we're going to talk about today. So again, what made you successful in corporate can cripple you as an entrepreneur. The first thing you say is consensus and approval. Why don't you explain that to us?
Sure. Anybody who's been in corporate knows that they work within an approval authority matrix. You don't spend money or put initiatives forward if you don't have the approval or the authority to do so. And even if you have the approval authority and the board's given you the approval, it doesn't matter if you're a mid-manager, a vice president, or the CEO, you're not going to go forward without the informal approval of your peers and getting consensus and making sure everyone's on board and that everyone feels heard and that you go forward with this initiative that's really backed up by a lot of people.
Right. Wanda, can you relate to that?
Absolutely. I said we have the perfect panel today because we've all worked for corporate, so I'm sure we can all relate at different levels. But yeah, it's I've been working for myself for so long, I don't know if I could go back to work for corporate because the whole asking for approval thing is, I don't know if I could do that again.
Well, and the thing is, I find that a lot of new entrepreneurs that come out of corporate actually do that unintentionally. because we're so used to talking about it, putting it forward in a meeting, that, and I mean, I did it too, right? So we talk to our friends, or we talk to our sister, or we talk to our spouse, or we talk to our mom, and they're all people that don't, in corporate, politics aside, everybody has an initiative and a goal to get the business objectives accomplished. But when we're talking about all the things we want to do with people who are not involved in our business, they don't actually understand what's going on, and having that mindset, even if we don't realize it consciously, we are kind of seeking approval. And let's be honest, if your husband says no, or your mom says, oh honey, that's not a good idea,
Yeah.
we listen at first, right? So it's super important.
What I remember when I first went from the corporate world to entrepreneurship, because there wasn't that whole consensus thing, I actually would be just thinking too much about stuff and not acting. That too. You know what? Are you sure this is right? Because you didn't have that sphere of people that you had to go through. Yeah. Gabby, can you relate to any of this?
Absolutely. I think it's difficult even when you start to build a team within your company. You could be a single entrepreneur, but then once you start bringing more people into the team, you always want everybody to be on board, right? And so I think that there's a constant struggle with that even, for me. I can definitely relate that it's hard because you're the visionary and you want to make sure that your vision is followed through on. And so, I think it's a big struggle, even for people like myself that has a team that, you're trying to move that concept forward. So, and sometimes I don't make the decision right away because, I'm worried about what everybody else thinks too. So I can completely, understand.
And I know in my early days of my business, I was always afraid, right? Because I didn't, like you said, I didn't have all that support. I thankfully have a husband who has been an entrepreneur a lot longer than I have, so he was probably a lot more supportive than most spouses might be. But even then, it's like you said, Cynthia, I would sit there and overthink because it was, nobody was giving me permission to do it, so I didn't know if it was the right decision. And here I was thinking I was powerful in my decisions because I was a VP. Turns out I really fell into that consensus trap, and it stopped me from making decisions in the beginning.
Yeah. Nafissa, is my business, I always love to give some smart tips, other than saying, this is one of the things that can cripple us as an entrepreneur. So I guess the first thing we need to do if we're doing this, right, we recognize it, right? Yes. We recognize that we're doing it. So then what would be your smart tip, to kind of battle through that?
My smart tip is that you need to be around people who understand what you're doing. Because let's face it, we aren't vacuums, right? So we aren't working in a vacuum. We can't work in a vacuum. We do need it. We're human. So instead of working with people who really don't understand your business, be part of a mastermind or go to events and meet other entrepreneurs. Get the mentoring that you need. Have an accountability partner that understands your business and that's going to keep your business interest in mind. So those are ways that you do have somebody to bounce ideas off of without it holding you back.
Awesome. Nafissa, great tips. I hope everybody's starting to write this stuff down. She's giving a lot of information in this short period of time. We are with Nafissa Shireen of NafissaShireen.com. She is the profitability expert. So we really appreciate you being on today. So I'm going to go right into your next point, okay?
Perfect.
Nafissa, is that, I can totally relate to this about when you're in the corporate world, about how you're trying to champion your team members.
Yes.
But you're saying, now you need to focus on something else, right? So why don't we talk about that?
Well, it's a total shift and throws you on your head. And I, even 3 years into this and we have employees and team, I still sometimes have to stop myself and realize that actually they need to champion me. And when you're in corporate, you're always looking at ways of succession planning and making these people look good and servant-based leadership and how do they replace you. But in your business, it's a whole different ball of wax because they may not have the same career path that they might have in a big corporation, and it depends whether they're entrepreneurial or whether they do have that as a long-term goal. And you really want them to buy into your vision
Right.
And they have to be always championing you. And it's also really interesting too, if we don't handle that carefully, it's really easy to become a tyrannical dictator, which a lot of, I mean, I've worked for entrepreneurs in my youth, and I know they can be, because it's our money at stake. So there's that balance of, you know, not going into panic and thinking, oh my God, this is all my money, and taking it out on your employees, or doing the complete opposite and just worrying about what they think and how you're going to champion them. So you still need to really step up into leadership, but with a different objective.
Okay, so I'm sure there's people out there right now, and I've got all these ideas swirling in my head. Okay, champion myself, what does that mean? Can you break it down? Like, can you give an example of something you might need to work on that you need to, you know, work on yourself? I think of, like, you know, skills that you might not, you know, have that you need to improve upon, or self-care.
Yes.
Would you be able to expand a little bit about that?
Sure.
Is that, okay, I need to champion myself. How do I do that, or what does that exactly mean?
Well, one of the things I've found with my current team that I would never have done in corporate is I tell them what I'm really, really, really bad at. And I need their help. And if I could do it, I wouldn't hire them. So how can they help me do that? And then I do take the one corporate skill that is worthwhile, as I just let them go do it and come back to me. But I'm very transparent in what my weaknesses are with them. And it really has made them really want to step up and help. You know, even though I was a CPA, I have my own accountant, because I actually can't handle the accounting side of things. And, you know, I just tell her, listen, you know, I used to be an accountant, but the truth is I'm lousy at it. So you got to help me out here. And you can't come down on me if my books are a mess, right? And so she actually steps in and takes care of it. My marketing and operations person, you know, she's right there, like, championing the business, because she's got a stake in it, because I've let her know how important her role is to me. So it's all about really making them feel like they're part of your success, and understanding that, well, you know, I'm a small business owner, so beyond me, what are your possibilities? And so when they look at it from that perspective, I'm finding they're very much wanting to help me fill in what I don't know about. And but it was a different shift. It was a whole different mindset. And I still sometimes find myself stopping and thinking, okay, how are they going to feel about this? Or what can I do for them? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I have to add on the point of, well, what can I do for them so that I can get what I need for myself and my business? It's a little, you have to be a little bit more selfish.
Gabby, when you first started your business, was this a process for you to champion yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I think, you know, because I was coming from a very humble place, so I never really thought of it that way at all. I mean, I started with a very small goal in mind. And so championing myself was not something that I was focusing on at all. It was just like, let's get some accounting done, you know, let's get some tax returns done, and that's all I really worried about. So yeah, and I think that it is probably the championing side is something that women really struggle with. I mean, I think it's more of a woman issue than, and maybe I'm wrong, but I know that a lot of women have a lot of trouble with that.
Wanda, what are your thoughts on what Gabby's saying, or adding to what Nafissa's saying?
Well, I know when I started my business, the first thing that I had to realize is that, you know, there's only so much time during the day, and if I was going to work my business the right way, I didn't want to burn myself out. And so you do have to put trust in getting help, whether you outsource your help or whether you have, you know, employees. So it's really important that everybody has the same mission, and that you're really clear on what that mission is together.
Yes.
Whether you know you have an outsourced contractor that might have other people that they work with, or whether you have an employee.
Yep, I agree. And that part about the mission, I think, is critical, because they have to be on board with that. And when you're dealing with an outside contractor, because many of us start with virtual assistants when we first start, it's a trick to come out of just being, you know, one person in their client roster versus someone that they're committed to with the mission. And it is that whole piece about championing yourself. And it's okay. And the thing is, when they do actually come on as a champion for you, they're actually going to give you amazing work, and they're going to be happy about it. And but it's done. It has to be done in a leadership way, not in a dictator way, right? You don't want to go to them and say, "You're here to serve me," right? You want them, like you said, Wanda, to really buy into that vision.
And Nafissa, you know, being the profitability expert, so many people have a hard time, you know, hiring on that first contractor because they say, oh, it's going to cost me so much money. But how much money are they going to be saving? Could you just touch on that?
Well, I like to look at it this way. Like, for even with my accountant, she's much faster than me. So if I look at what I pay her versus how long it takes me, just the time-wise of it, but also when you look at it from the point of view of if it's an admin person or not a role that's generating money. So if you're doing admin tasks, you're going to be earning admin wages. It's that simple because you're not out generating income. You're not out serving clients. You're meanwhile, you know, checking boxes or data entering things. So in the short term, yes, it's a cash outlay, but you have to look at what they're going to bring back. And one of the things that I encourage my clients to do, and I do this when I hire people, is I'll make a scorecard up. It's a little bit more detailed than, let's say, a job description, and I want to know, I'll have criteria on each of those. It either has to have a dollar sign, a number, or a percentage. So, you know, increase revenue by such percent, or increase booking people into strategy sessions by so much. And so everything has to be quantified when I do that. And when you do that, it actually makes the investment a lot more palatable to see.
Awesome. And just last point that I always think it's so tough just for people to release control. We must release control of doing everything ourselves, right?
Yes.
And hand it off to someone that we trust, you know what I mean? And give them the tools and, you know, lay it out for them what you expect and, you know, inspire them and stuff. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us for Hot Tips for Biz with Wanda Baader and I. We're so thrilled to have Nafissa Shireen with us from NafissaShireen.com. She is the profitability expert, and she's giving us some great tips for our business. So I'm going to move on to the next point, Nafissa, because we are rocking and rolling through this half-hour show.
We are.
Talk about how perfectionism can be so great in the corporate world, but it can just be a killer in business.
You do not go into a boardroom with a typo, or your column's not all the same size with the same info, or the wrong fonts. I mean, you just don't do it. I've done it. It's not pretty, right? Because they stop looking at what's in there. As an entrepreneur, you can't do that. You just have to let things go and let things happen imperfectly. And I really suffered from this really bad, because my last few years in corporate, our CFO was so particular, right down to fonts and colors and column widths. I had a hard time letting go of that. And thankfully, I was doing a workshop with a colleague who was still in corporate, and that was a turning point for me, because we didn't get our sales page up because she kept going back on commas and semicolons. And finally I said, oh my goodness, great grammar is perfect, but what really is going to suck are empty bums, or empty seats, no bums in the seats, right? So we just have to get it done. And that was a turning point for me to realize sometimes you just have to let it go. And if somebody takes the amount of time to notice your errors, they've just got too much time on their hands anyway. And learn as you go. And if you make a mistake, you can fix it. If you put the wrong link in an email, well, just fix it next time, right? And those were big learning points for me, was to get over the fact that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be done, and it needs to get out there. Because while you're busy being perfect, you're busy not making money.
Right. Any former perfectionists here on the panel other than myself?
I identify with that.
Wanda, you're raising your hand. I think we all have at least a little bit of that. I know I have. Can you, I mean, obviously you can relate to what Nafissa's saying. Yeah, anything to add, or, you know, just, you know what, if you're a former perfectionist, you always have that little bit of it, right? And so you just have to consistently work on doing.
Yeah.
Doing, and you're going to become an expert, right, from doing, not just thinking about it. Gabby, do you also relate to the perfectionism stuff?
I think I'm kind of the opposite in that.
Really?
Yeah. I am. Is even though I'm a CPA, I'm very entrepreneur, and so I jump into things sometimes not thinking out all the different things. So my team has been really great to help me with those things, and I think maybe the giving up control and the perfectionism is that they don't necessarily do it exactly the way I would want it to be done, but we still get the mission completed. So I think maybe that is where I've struggled a little bit, but you know, you have to get past that so that the mission is accomplished. And so, you know, perfectionism, I guess, in that arena, yes, but no, I jump into things maybe too quickly. Wanda can vouch for that sometimes.
Nafissa, how do you move past the perfectionism? Someone that has been doing it for so long, you know what I mean, is that to just take little steps forward? I mean, again...
No, actually, you know what happens is when you're that perfect, something's going to blow up really big on you. And when it does, because that happened to me one day with a video launch, it was the wrong video, wrong links. My husband was waking me up to let me know it's the wrong links in there, and you just go, you know, I'm done. And after that, you survive it, and then it gets a lot easier to let go. And I've found that even with my friends and colleagues, it's hard to let go of that until something blows up and you realize, you know what, I actually survived that and people liked me more because I was human.
You know, and one of my mentors and a friend of mine, Katerina Rando, I remember several years ago, she was just talking with me, and just in the group, she kind of put her hands on our shoulders and said, you know what, people are waiting for your gifts. They're just waiting for you. And so that's just kind of like, you know what, you're right. You know what, the more you think about it, the more people cannot receive your gifts that you have. So
exactly.
All right. So, all right, let's talk about budgeting and long-term planning, about, you know, the difference between the corporate world and being an entrepreneur.
So, well, it really depends on what kind of environment you're in corporate. If you're in a project-based environment, it will be a lot more like being an entrepreneur. If you're in an operating environment, you set your budgets at the beginning of the year. It's based in keeping costs down, and you look at the cost, like the budget line item and a cost, and how can you bring it down, right, every year. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, if you start with the money first, like how much do I want to spend, you could be shortchanging yourself. Now, I am about financial responsibility, so I'm not saying, you know, throw it all, caution to the wind, but as an entrepreneur, you really got to be thinking about what you want to accomplish first, and that what people, time, resources, skills, supplies do you need to make that happen, and then you figure out how you create the money for that. And I think that kind of ties into like the next point too, that's one of the biggest mindset shifts you can make, because in corporate, you know, it wasn't our money we're spending, and it was someone else's. So now it's our own, and if you bring that habit to it of just I've got to keep the money down, you could be shortchanging yourself. So, and I'm not saying go spend crazy. I'm saying be very outcome focused and plan your spending that way. Then you know how much cash you need to generate, how much you need to have available to you, and then you have something to compare it to. So if you want, you know, if you, like, for example, if somebody said, I'm going to spend $100 this month networking, that's my budget, is $100 a month for networking, that doesn't really kind of do much, versus if you said, I want to create 5 new clients this month, and to do that, I need to speak to 15 people, and I need them to be, you know, these are my avatar, and these are where they hang out, and oh, these are the events they go to. Oh, it's going to cost 110, right? And you can put that number in there, and then you compare yourself. Like, if you spent more, did you get your 5 clients? Or if you spent less, and then you can kind of look at the two, like the qualitative amount and the quantitative amount, to know if you're meeting your actual goals, and the money follows it.
Interesting conversation. While you're talking, Nafissa, you know, I have to throw it to my co-host, Wanda Baader at Strategize Your Success, because she is a marketing expert, and she works with clients all the time. What do you have to say about what Nafissa is saying about this whole thing about budgeting and planning and dealing with marketing, you know, with people?
You know, it's like everybody has a bottom line, obviously. Sometimes you have to go a little bit beyond that bottom line in order to make things happen. So my job is to find out exactly, I don't ask people what's your budget because I want to spend it all. I just need to know what's the reality, you know, for your budget. And then once we know that, then we know, you know, what can we do and what can't we do. what's going to be more important now. You know, you get to pick and choose.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody out there is working with a professional like myself, we're asking you that question for a reason, not because we want to spend all your money.
Yeah.
Talk to us about budgeting, Gabby. Any thoughts to throw out to Nafissa or add to what Wanda said?
Well, I think that you're right. The mindset is really, really important because it's essentially investment back into your company.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily an expense line on the P&L, right?
Yeah.
And I think so many people think of it that way instead of, well, you know, every dollar that goes out should give you some sort of return. You know, yes, there's electric bill and you get electricity. Well, it's the same with marketing. It's the same with, you know, consulting and accounting and all those things. So if they think about it as an investment instead of it's just gone, then I think it's helpful that way too. So we always say invest in yourself. Invest.
I think one of, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that really stuck with me, the one habit I did bring over that was very helpful, is when I started to work in a project-based environment, and this was a whole new thing for me at that point in my career. We actually prepared a statement of work first and then put the numbers behind it. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, Gabby, it's like you said, you're looking at what you want to accomplish and what the return is that you want, and you prepare that, and then you attach numbers to it versus the other way around.
Right.
And then, as you said, Wanda, if you do that and then you realize, you know, I actually don't have the resources at this point, then instead of just cutting dollar amounts back, okay, which of these activities are the most high value that are going to stay here, and what can I pull out, instead of looking at the dollars first.
Right.
So Nafissa, as part of your business having to do with all this, and we're going to get to your last point in a second, so as the profitability expert, you kind of evaluate where the business is right now, and you kind of help people, you know, figure out how to make much more profit in their business. Give just a little taste of what.
Well, I mean, I work with my clients to help them build their business from the ground up, you know, and I refer to profitability because I like to look at all those initiatives that we put in place, whether it's developing their brand or figuring out who their ideal client is or putting their packages together with a profit focus, not a revenue focus. Because it doesn't matter if you make $1 million if it costs you 1.2. So I bring that piece in because it's just to remind people that you need to have some money too, right? And a lot of times I'll see people, you know, when they price themselves or they set their fees, they're looking at, okay, well, what would I want to be paid for this? And they base it on what they want, but they forget their business has a whole lot of other costs. They're just one of them.
Right.
So when I work with my clients, we build the business, but everything has to come back to what do they actually want for themselves at the end of the day, so that we can build it backwards.
Perfect. Nafissa, your last point, which I think is so important for business owners, is having to do with mindset. You know what I mean? And just we talked about it a little bit, but what is the biggest mindset shift, do you think, from going from corporate to being an entrepreneur? What do you have to do?
I think the biggest mindset shift is, I mean, I think we started with the first one on consensus and approval, but it's actually, it ties into all the points we talked about. It's about realizing that you are an entrepreneur. You might know a lot about business, but you don't know anything about being an entrepreneur. You might know how to work with entrepreneurs, but do you know how to be an entrepreneur? And that's quite a mindset shift. When there's suddenly no place you need to be in the morning sometimes if you work from home or you don't have a team or you're not sure where to go or you don't have the clear direction, it can be a challenge to really kind of figure out, well, what are my next steps and how do I become an entrepreneur? How do I look at my business the same way that I would look at my company's business, but yet still be able to be emotionally detached from it, because in your corporate role there's a certain amount of emotional detachment. It's not your money. So I think the biggest shift is realize that it's all you, and you need to learn how to be a different person. Your corporate executive skills will get you so far, but they're not going to take you to that level of success. And for me, it was getting the help I needed from mentors, surrounding myself with people like you guys at events, people who walked the path before me. Really important.
Awesome.
Changing identities, really.
Right. Perfect. You know, I think we could talk for an hour with you, Nafissa, or more, because you know what, you've got so much to offer, and it's so great to have you on today. I'm going to throw it back to you, Nafissa, but Gabby, I want to say a quick thank you for being on the show today. But Nafissa, please let people know the best way to get in touch with you. I know on your banner is your website. Final words. We want to thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you so much. If people want to get hold of me, you can go to my website. It's on the banner there. And yeah, all my connection points are there. There's contact forms and phone numbers, but that's the best way to get hold of me is through my website.
Awesome. You know, Nafissa, you were awesome on the show today. Really appreciate it. I am going to pass it on back to Wanda, my co-host, to finish us off for the day.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and thank you, Nafissa and Gabrielle, for being on the call and bringing your expertise in on this particular subject. And, of course, my amazing co-host, Cynthia, who we'll miss next week because she will be on vacation. But we do hope that you join us every Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Google Hangouts. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.